Good evening, everyone. I am so glad that you have joined us for day 21 of 21 days of prayer. We have been studying the book on prayer by Pastor Ken Gurley, and tonight we're going to begin at page 279. You'll notice in your book it only says day 20, but we did some other stuff along the way, and so we didn't get through the whole book, but you can take some time on your own. And you can go through the last chapter. Today we're going to talk about changing the spiritual climate. One thing, if there's one thing you could do to change everything, one thing that could cause your life for people to see in a different way and for you to see your life in a different way, something that would open a clear path before you, something that would cause you to glow like a light in the darkness, cause you to repair everything that is damaged, and cause you to ride high and soar above adversity. What would this thing be that you could do? Well, I must warn you, it's not something you're going to like. Your flesh is going to absolutely hate it. It's going to be a rough ride, but it is one thing you can do, and it will change everything in your life. And I'm going to read the scripture from Isaiah, and it says this in Isaiah 58:6. Is it not the fast that I have chosen? Yes, you got the word there, fast. Is it not the fast that I have chosen to loose the bonds of wickedness, to undo the heavy burdens, to let the oppressed go free, and that you break every yoke? God has chosen fasting to break the spiritual climate, to change the spiritual climate. Fasting along with prayer can move you from a cloud watcher to a rainmaker. It can move you from being reactive to proactive. It can move you from being a thermometer to being a thermostat. Fasting can change everything. God chose fasting. The word fast simply means to refrain from. In fact, breakfast is more than just the name of the morning meal, but it is the meal that occurs within the time frame where we break fast, where we break our fast. Fasting is an act of self-denial. Jesus said that man shall not live by bread alone, but by God's word. And so fasting turns us from what is sustaining in our physical life to what sustains us in our spiritual life. And I think sometimes we're so worried about the physical, but yet we neglect the spiritual. Prayer is so important. We've spent 21 days talking about it, but there's something about adding a fast to your prayer that it gives a turbo boost to your prayer. It moves it into high speed. It's kind of like when you go to a amusement park, and I went there this last year with some of my grandkids, and they got me on Space Mountain, and I said I'll never ride that ride again. But man, it just thrust you out, and it's like, okay, here we go. Prayer will get you on the ride, but fasting will put you in turbo speed of things happening in your life, things that you are praying for. When you fast, it happens quicker. When you're trying to break through things and you're dealing with struggles in your life, fasting just accentuates it and makes it come so much faster to get the victory over those things. And so fasting is mentioned about 30 times in the New Testament. A lot of times people like to just say, well, if it's not in the New Testament, we don't have to do it because it's not in the New Testament. Well, guess what? It's mentioned 30 times in the New Testament. And generally it's in a favorable sense. On the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said this: when you pray, when you give, and when you fast. He didn't say if, but he said when. When you pray, we all ought to pray. When you give, we all ought to give. When you fast, we all ought to fast. And so we understand that fasting combined with prayer will change the spiritual climate. The Bible tells us in Exodus that Moses prayed, but he also fasted. In Genesis 24, Abraham's servant prayed, but he also fasted. In 1 Samuel, Hannah prayed, for a child, but she also fasted. David, Daniel, Elijah, and Ezra, they all fasted. Nehemiah fasted before he rebuilt Jerusalem. Esther fasted prior to speaking to the king for her people. The Ninevites, they repented and fasted, and God spared their life. Jesus fasted at the outset of his ministry. Paul fasted after the Damascus road experience and continued to fast often during his ministry. In fact, the Christians who were first, the Christians at Antioch, where they were first called Christians, they fasted before they sent Paul and Barnabas on their first missionary journey. So the biblical precedent is very strong for fasting. The act of fasting, understandably, will rub our flesh the wrong way because the appetites of our flesh are at odds with the appetite of the spiritual. And so fasting is not something that we jump up and down and we get all excited about doing, but it's something that changes the spiritual climate. So we ask, why do we fast? What is the rationale for fasting, and why is it essential? Our motivation has to be pure when we fast. It has to be for the right reason. God demonstrated that to Isaiah. He said, the people are fasting, but they're fasting for the wrong reason. Even the Pharisees, Jesus said, they fast 2 and 3 days a week, but they're doing it for the wrong reason. They're doing it to be seen of men. And so even though they were fasting 2 days a week, because they were doing it for the wrong reason, it was not benefiting anything in their life. So God rewards giving, praying, and fasting in secret when you do it on your own. I know there's times that during this time we've got up and we've encouraged people to fast, and who will take a fast day, and that's great. But really the most power comes when you choose a time. Maybe nobody else is fasting, but you say, God, I need to get closer with you. God, I've got some things that I'm battling with in my life. When you fast and you couple it with prayer, you will be able to deal with those things much easier than before. God rewards it when we do it in secret. When God lays it on our hearts to fast, it's like, well, let's just go back to Isaiah really quick and look at the reasons that God gave to Isaiah for the reason for fasting. The first is to loose the bonds of wickedness. So Paul says that sin no longer has dominion over us in Romans 6 and 14. But in fasting, it proves that we are not in bondage to anything else. It proves that we are loosing the bonds of wickedness in our life. So if you feel things coming on you that are not like God, when you fast, it helps you to be an overcomer over those things that would like to come into your life. The second reason is to undo heavy burdens. Sin is a heavy burden. A guilty conscience is a heavy burden. A grudge, an offense. These are heavy things to carry around. And sometimes when you fast, it will help you to overcome these heavy burdens in your life. Maybe you're in a situation. Maybe you got in a confrontation. The other day, there was somebody that came against me, and I never even actually talked to them. They left it on my message machine. But it was like they came against me, and I was like, what can I do? What do I do? And I have to realize that those things, and they bothered me because I don't like people being upset with me. They bothered me. But I knew it was out of my control. It was nothing I could do. It was really not my problem. It was the other person's problem. And they were just venting. By the way, they don't go to our church, okay? But it's like what we have to do is we just have to sometimes go to God and say, God, I'm going to push the plate aside. I need you to release this heavy burden from off of me. Thirdly, it's to set the opposed or the oppressed free. There was a thing that they did in the Old Testament. It was called the year of Jubilee. So on the 50th year, if you were a slave, if you were indebted to people, whatever, on the 50th year, everybody was released from debt. Everybody was released from, if they had to be a slave or something during that 50-year period, everybody was released. All the ground went back to its original owners. Everything was restored Man, that would be an awesome year, wouldn't it? The 50th year. And so that's what happens when you fast. Everything goes back to normal. It's like an upset the fruit basket, put everything back the way it was in the original. And so that happens. Fasting brings freedom. And then the fourth reason is to break every yoke. When the spirit or when the flesh is weakened by fasting, anointing of the spirit comes into your life, and it makes the spiritual become more dominant than the fleshly, because the flesh is weak, but the spirit is strong when we are fasting. So again, when you fast and couple it with prayer, it really can make a difference in your life. So you say, well, how do we fast? Now, fasting can take on many forms. It simply means refrain from. So you can fast from one thing, or you can fast from many things. So let's talk about spiritual fasting. Spiritual fasting, or I should say supernatural spiritual fasting. Supernatural fasting only happened very few times in the Bible. Moses did it, Elijah did it, Jesus did it. But it was a 40-day fast. Now, I don't recommend anybody to just jump right in and do a 40-day fast. Some of you are you're like, I didn't want to watch this program tonight, and you're clicking off going to something else. But 40 days of fasting, that is something that each one of those that did it, they were in a high spiritual place. They were leaders. They were isolated unto themselves for 40 days. And God gave them supernatural strength to endure 40 days of fasting. But 40 days, that's a long time. But there's also other times where there were other supernatural fasts as well, that where, in fact, if you went 40 days without food and water, you might wind up in the hospital. I mean, because that is, you can fast for short periods of food, but going without water is really, really difficult, because your body is, so much of the percentage of your body is water. And so, and yes, some of us have too much water. Then there's like absolute fasting. These are short periods of time where you fast with no water and no food. There were people like Paul, Ezra, Esther. They're examples of that, where they just had short periods of time, maybe 3 days, maybe 7 days, but it was not a lengthy fast. I remember growing up, our pastor had us do a lot of 3-day fast, and a lot of people went 3 days, no food, no water. I'll just be honest with you. I don't do very many fasts where I do no food, no water. I usually at least do water. Because I get thirsty, and it's like I just can't function at all without water. But people do it different ways. If I was just doing 1-day fast, I could probably do a 1-day fast with no food, no water. But everybody does it different. But then there's partial fastings, and partial fastings is kind of what Daniel did. Daniel gave up certain things because he was instructed to eat things that he wasn't supposed to eat. And so he went and he bargained with the king and said, can we do this instead of doing that? And so sometimes you fast partial fast, where you give up sugar, and you don't eat sugar, or you don't eat bread, or maybe you avoid caffeine or other foods. Now, let me just tell you, when you fast, whatever your fleshly nature is, it wants to come out. You can get an attitude. I remember one time I was fasting and I had an attitude. My mom was like, you might as well go eat, because your fasting is doing nothing for you. And what it was is just my flesh was starting to rise to the top, and I was becoming very obnoxious. I know none of you have ever done that. But when you're fasting, understand that you may get a little bit of an attitude. And the reason is because it's your flesh resisting against the spiritual. And so that's why a lot of times when you fast, it's good to slip away and have prayer coupled with your fasting, because it will help with that. But if you want to change the spiritual climate, we choose to fast. Sometimes people fast for 1 day. Maybe they get up in the morning, they fast breakfast, they fast lunch. And then, especially if you've never fasted, that's a very good routine, where you fast lunch, fast breakfast, lunch, and then maybe eat dinner, or maybe eat, around 6 o'clock or so. Some people get up and they say, I'm going to eat breakfast and I'm going to fast the rest of the day, and I'm not going to eat till the next morning. Everybody does it different. But you do it in the purpose of fasting is that you do it for the right reason. In other words, don't say you're going to fast breakfast and lunch and then you eat dinner at 2:30. That's kind of, you might as well go ahead and eat lunch. But what I'm saying is there has to be some denial in your life. Now, I will say this, if you do have to take cautions with your fasting. A lot of times people are on medications and things like that where you have to take food with certain medications. And so in that case, maybe you're fasting things that you really like. So you're eating things, maybe if you don't eat vegetables while you're fasting, just so you have food to react to whatever medicine it is you're taking. So you have to be smart when you fast. But fasting is not easy. You have to choose to fast. Invariably, when I decide to fast, somebody will call me and invite me to a really good restaurant. And you know what my first inclination is? I'll fast tomorrow. I'll just go because that's really good. I love that food, so I'm just going to go. But fasting is somebody may call you and ask you to go eat, but you have to resist, and you have to just tell them, no, I'm not available today. You don't have to say, no, I'm fasting today. You just say, man, I really wish I could. Man, I love that place, but today I'm just not available today. And just leave it at that. You don't have to, no, I'm fasting. Man, I wish I wasn't fasting today. We don't do it like that. But you're going to have to understand that when you fast, when you come through it, a new you will emerge on the other side. But understand, fasting draws us into God's presence. God sees they are resisting things that they like in their life because they are wanting something from me. What is it that you want? That you would lay aside all those things and focus on me. And so that's where God's power is revealed when you fast. Our weakness combined with his power makes the spiritual climate in our life change. But I have some questions for you. The first question is, do you have a lost loved one? The second question, do you need a financial turnaround? The third question, do you need to be freed from chains of hate, lust, and addiction? If you do, fasting can help you in these areas. Another thing I didn't mention, but some people fast social media. Some people fast TV. Some people fast computer. Some people, I know with work, sometimes you can't. But what you don't have to fast just food. You can fast from things in your life. And any type of fasting that you're showing God, it's not this, okay? Man, I'm so fed up with social media. I'm going on a week fast. That's not when you fast social media. You fast social media when you're on social media all the time and you realize, I need to put this away and I'm going to fast from it. It's not that you're upset because of all the stuff you see on it. So I'm going on a 30-day fast of social media. You know what's crazy is I see people do that, and then in the middle of the 30 days, they jump on. Just want to remind everyone that I'm fasting from social media, so I'm not on here to be able to respond to you. Come on. You're not fasting from social media. You just made a post. So what I'm saying is when you fast, totally put those things out of your mind. Sometimes, if you can, a good time to fast is where you know you're going to have a lot of time where you are by yourself, where you're not going to be around people, where you're not, it's like, you got a birthday party on that day and they're serving food and you go to that birthday party. That's the day I'm going to fast. No, don't do that. Fast on a day where you don't have anything scheduled, because that way you're not having to tell people, no, I can't eat, I'm fasting, because you don't want to lie during the fast, where it's like, you're there and it's like, no, I just really don't like prime rib. I'm going to skip it this time because I love prime rib. Then you're lying, and that doesn't help you with a fast. So I think you got it. I kind of tried to make a little humor there because sometimes humor helps the medicine go down. But fasting is God ordained, and it is a time, and it's God ordained and time worn, means to change the spiritual climate. God has chosen a fast for you. And which fast is that? That's what you have to go to God in prayer and say, God, what do you want me to fast? What is it that you, and if you're sincere and you're sincere with God and you are asking him, God, I really need to fast, but I don't really know what you want me to fast from. If you go to God in prayer and you give it to God, God will show you what you need to fast from. God will show you how you need to fast, whether that's a complete fast, whether that's a partial fast, whether that's a fast from certain things. God will show you. And then when you're moved on by the Spirit, then do it. Don't be moved on by the Spirit and then not do it, because you might as well not even have asked God for it. So when you fast, pray, ask God how to fast, and God will help you, and you will notice the spiritual climate change around you when you fast. Thank you for joining us for these 21 days of prayer. And for the last thing on this 21st day, I want to pray for each and every one of you. Lord, I just thank you today, God, for each of the people that have joined us in this 21 days of prayer. And Lord, I thank you today, God, for all that you have accomplished in these last 21 days. God, we have gone through so many things in prayer. God, you have given us so many tools to use in how to approach you. God, we can come to you in so many different ways. And God, I thank you for the opportunity that we have, that we can talk to our Creator, the opportunity, God, that you have given us, that we can come into your presence, God, and just be in your presence and know that you are listening to us. God, I thank you for Pastor Ken Gurley and putting together this book, because it has enlightened our eyes in so many ways to pray and so many things to do. God, I pray, Lord, that we will keep this book handy so that sometimes when we forget about how we can communicate with you, it's a guidebook that can help us to correspond with your word, which is the most important book that we could ever read. Lord, I pray today, God, that you would help us, Lord, to draw close to you this year, 2023. God, help us to draw close to you in a way that we have never experienced before. God, I just thank you for everyone that's joined on this journey, Lord, and I just pray that you would help us all, God, because our desire is to draw close to you. Our desire, God, is to bring others and to help others come into your presence as well. God, we just thank you for everything you've done for us in this year 2023. God, we thank you for it. We give you praise in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you for joining us on this 21 days of prayer. I encourage you to come and join us tomorrow morning at the downtown church. We are meeting at Lakeview Middle School and at 11 o'clock. Hopefully we'll see you there. Come early for donuts and coffee, all that good stuff. And then at 11 o'clock, we enter in for a time of worship. God bless you. Thank you for joining us on the 21 days of prayer journey. Have a good evening.